I'm Jeff Paur, senior writer with RealTime Fantasy Sports. Welcome to another edition of the RealTime Fantasy Sports Show. On today's show, it's time for starts, sits, and sleepers for Week 16 of the fantasy football season. I'm joined today by my son, Henry Paur. Henry, thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
He's on break, so he is ready to help me out here today. So
Yeah.
we're going to do this. First time we've done this year together, start, sits, and sleepers. It's a good show, very informative, but it's the playoffs, Henry, and you're likely either in the semifinals or maybe the first week, depending on how your league set up. Regardless, it's a crucial week of games. Just don't get too cute this time of year, right? Play your studs. Don't fall in love with certain matchups and whatever. Just go with the guys that got you here. I know some of them don't have great matchups this week, but you got to go with them. Don't get too cute, right? All right. So with that said, let's jump into this. Should be a lot of fun. We're going to give you start, sit, and sleeper for each position, and we're going to start with the QB spot. Henry, who is your start at quarterback this week?
Yeah, I got a guy with a great matchup, and I got Gino Smith. He's got a great matchup against Kansas City this week. He's got a very weak secondary so far. Gino did have a little bit of a rough week last week, but that was against the 49ers defense, which is probably the best in the NFL. But the 3 weeks before that, he's had 20-plus points. Did a great matchup this week again. They might be down, might throw the ball a lot. I really like Gino Smith a lot this week.
I like him too. I think he'll do well. He's been consistent all year as well. So I think he'll keep it going, especially with Kenneth Walker banged up too. My start is Daniel Jones with the New York Giants. Believe it or not, Jones is 13th overall in fantasy quarterback scoring this year. He's really been pretty consistent. Mainly because of his ability to run the ball. It really helps his fantasy floor. He has 20-plus fantasy points, 2 of 3 games, and 5 of 7. I think he'll hit that mark again this week against Minnesota. They've been dreadful against the pass this year, so maybe his passing numbers are a little better to go with those good rushing totals. Vikings just 31st overall against the pass, allowing 278.8 passing yards per game. Okay, Henry, how about a sit at the position?
I had Dak Prescott. Now, I know last week he had a great week. He had those 2 picks at the end of the game, but the weeks before that, he had 3 tough matchups and failed to put up 18 points in all of those games. He's got a really rough matchup this week against Philadelphia's defense. I could see him having a rough week, and they might run the ball a lot in that game, so I don't see him having a good week.
I agree. I don't like his matchup either, and I don't like his production lately as well. I really think they should run the ball more in that offense with those 2 backs, and haven't really done it to date, even with him making some mistakes. Okay, let's talk about my sit. It's Tua Tagovailoa. I know this is a little bit of a tough one to sit because he's been so great all season, most of the year. He's really cooled since his fast start, though. He has fewer than 20 fantasy points, 3 of 4 games. He has not had a 3-touchdown game since week 10. It seems really to me like the rest of the league's kind of catching up to this Dolphins offensive scheme. They're making him take more chances down the field, not doing all that quick stuff, those quick passes to his receivers and running backs out of the backfield. They're kind of trying to take that away, making him push the ball down the field. He's had struggle with his accuracy doing that. And he has a tough matchup this week against Green Bay. Green Bay's 2nd overall against the pass, allow the 9th fewest points to quarterbacks this year as well. So if you have better options, I would really consider him with his cooling off at this point of the year. Okay, how about a sleeper at the position, Henry?
I have Jared Goff. In a week where they kind of have to win, if they want to make the playoffs, I could see it then throwing the ball a lot against this Carolina defense. Not the best against the pass. He could have a huge week throwing the ball. He's had some great matchups. He had some great weeks last couple weeks. Last week wasn't the best throw, but before that, he had some great 20-plus point performances. He's had some early in the season where he put up 35. I mean, Goff could have a huge week this week.
All right, I like that. And my sleeper is Brock Purdy with the San Francisco 49ers. So he's really done a good job since taking over as a starter. He has multiple touchdowns, 3 straight games, top 20 fantasy points in one of those games. He really does well managing this offense, taking what defenses are giving him, and he has some great weapons to work with, and I think that really helps his production as well. He is 10th in quarterback scoring his last 3 games, so he's a good plug-and-play, in my opinion, if you're looking for somebody maybe for Jalen Hurts this week, who's banged up, not expected to play. I think Purdy's a good play against the Commanders. They have allowed 20 passing touchdowns this year. To move on to that running back spot now, Henry, who do you like as a start at running back?
I really like him this week. It's Isaiah Pacheco. Last week wasn't the best week. Jared McKinnon kind of took off in that week again in that receiving game. But in this week, they really might pound the rock to Chiefs with them probably being up a good amount in this game. I could see them really running the ball, and with Seattle's very weak rushing defense, I could see Pacheco having a huge week. He had some big games recently, but I think he could have a huge one this week.
All right, I like Pacheco, and you kind of talked about this. Maybe the Cowboys looking to run the ball more this week. I think they will. So I really like Tony Pollard. He's having a breakout season. He's become a legit top 10 fantasy back. He's 7th overall in fantasy scoring. He has 20 plus fantasy points, 2 of 3 and 5 of 7 games. He didn't score a touchdown last week. Still top 100 total yards in that game. He gets Philadelphia. They allow 121.1 rushing yards per game, kind of middle of the pack against the run. And they allowed 150 plus rushing yards 3 of their last 7 games. So they kind of struggle in that area lately. So I think Dallas runs the ball a lot. Pollard has a big game. Okay, Henry, how about a sit at running back for this week?
I have Brian Robinson. A lot of his workload lately of him, not a lot of receiving games, mostly stuff he gets on the ground. Hasn't had a touchdown that recently, I believe. And last week he only had 90 yards and like a catch for 18 yards. And with this week having the 49ers defense is the best team against the run in the NFL, it could be a very rough week for Brian Robinson.
Yeah, I agree. He could struggle on this one. My sit is Jamal Williams with the Detroit Lions. I know he's had a huge year, been a huge touchdown guy, but he's really become touchdown dependent lately. He's not getting many yards on the ground. He has fewer than 30 yards, fewer than 40 yards, 3 straight games. DeAndre Swift is playing more. Swift actually had more outsnap. He outsnapped him last week, I should say, easy for me to say. So he was on the field more. I think that could be a case going forward with Swift getting healthier. And Williams is kind of a boomer bust play at this point. I'm not sure he finds the end zone this week in week 8, so I would steer clear of him in this matchup. All right, let's move on to sleeper now, Henry. Who's a sleeper for you at running back?
I have Raheem Mostert. Last week was a huge breakout week for him. He had a huge week, monster numbers. He had one huge run in the first half against Buffalo. And this week he has Green Bay's defense. Isn't the best against the run, but they're not the worst. But I think he could have a huge week this week. I don't know if Jeff Wilson's playing on it. I believe he's still questionable. But he could have a huge week if he's the only running back active for them.
Yeah, and Tua's struggling a little bit, so maybe they give Mostert a few more chances than normal. My sleeper is James Cook with the Buffalo Bills. He's continuing to get more and more playing time for the Bills. He has played at least 36% of the snaps 3 straight games. Cook scored his 2nd touchdown of the season last week. He has double-digit fantasy points 2 or 3 games. I think he keeps it going this week against the Bears, a defense that struggled against the run. Chicago allows the 7th most fantasy points to running backs, 27th overall against the run. I could see Buffalo getting up big and running the ball a lot in this matchup. Let's move on to receiver now, Henry. Let's talk about a start at receiver in week 16.
I have Darius Slayton. The Giants have a very good matchup this week with the Vikings. You have a very poor secondary. I could see Slayton going for huge numbers this week, but then probably passing the ball because the rush defense is the worst in the world for the Vikings, but their pass attack is very poor, and Slayton could have huge numbers this week. If a lot of the wide receivers being injured this year on the Giants, I could see him having a huge week by throwing the ball a lot in New York.
All right, my start is DJ Moore with the Carolina Panthers. He's finally coming around. He's building a pretty good rapport with new starting quarterback Sam Darnold. Moore scored a touchdown last week. He has scores 2 or 3 games. He also has 18-plus fantasy points 2 of those games. I think he can keep it going this week against the Lions. Detroit allows the 3rd most fantasy points to receivers, 30th overall against the pass. They're playing better against the run, so I think they could shut down that Panthers running game a little bit, so they might be forced to throw more, and I think that's good news for Moore in this matchup. All right, let's move on to a sit at receiver. How about a guy you're thinking about sitting this week?
I had Vada Smith. There's no Jalen Hurts playing. You had Gardner Minshew. I think is going to go more of the safety blanket in the offense, which is A.J. Brown. More secure guy, probably going to get more work than Devonta. Cowboys defense, too, is very good in general all around. I could see them going more to A.J. Brown and more of a little bit more of a run game in this game.
All right. Tough to sit Devonta Smith this time of year. He's pretty good star receiver, but like you said, he has some red flags this week, so you might want to think about sitting him in this matchup. My sit is Trailon Burks with the Tennessee Titans. He's expected to return from his concussion. He's been practicing this week. He's missed the last 2 games, but he's been erratic his rookie year. He has just 2 games with double-digit fantasy points. He gets the Texans this week, a team that has shut down opposing number 1 receivers, plus Malik Willis is expected to start for Tennessee. I don't think that's good news for Burks either. and Houston allows the fourth fewest fantasy points to receivers on the year. So I think if you have better options, I'd steer clear Burks in this matchup against the Texans. All right, sleeper. Let's talk about sleeper at receiver, Henry.
I got Russell Gage. He's had a lot of red zone looks the last 2 weeks. Last week, he had 2 touchdowns and over 50 yards and I think 4 catches. Very solid week. Brady's targeting him a lot more. They're using him a lot more in this offense. Like I said, a lot of red zone looks, which could really help his value. He's got a very good matchup this week against Arizona, who's a very poor passing defense. I could see Gage had a pretty good week this week.
All right, my sleeper is Demarcus Robinson of the Baltimore Ravens. Devin Duvernay, he's now out for the year, suffered a foot injury in practice. I think Robinson's the number one guy at this point. He's been pretty consistent, even with some of those other receivers healthy. He has at least 5 receptions, 3 straight in 4 or 5 games. He has double-digit fantasy points 3 of those games. His numbers aren't off the charts, but consistent. He could get a lot of looks this week as well against the Falcons. They allow the 4th most fantasy points to receivers, 20th overall against the pass. I think Baltimore could have a little more success throwing this week than they have in recent weeks. So I think Robinson could see his numbers bump up a little. Let's move on to that frustrating tight end position. It's kind of been all over the map outside of Travis Kelce. Who do you like as a possible start?
Yeah, I like Tyler Conklin this week. I know last week Uzama kind of took over that tight end role a little bit, but Conklin's had a very solid year at the tight end position. Jacksonville's not the best against tight ends and the passing attack this year. I mean, he can have a pretty good week.
Yeah, and he's been pretty good, kind of under the radar. He's had a couple really big games, and so he's, I believe he's in the top 10 in fantasy scoring at tight end right now. So Conklin could do well again this week. My start is Darren Waller. In my opinion, if you have him and you don't really have many good options, if you got platoon guys, I think you just got to go with Waller. He returned last week finally from his hamstring injury. He had 3 catches for 48 yards and a score. Tight end has been horrible this year, like I said. I think if you own him, you got to play him. His ceiling's just too high for me to sit. I know he carries some question marks a little bit, but he's been one of the best in recent years. And I think if you want to go big in the playoffs, got to take some chances. And I know Waller's a little bit of a risk in his second game back, but he should get more snaps this week and maybe improve on those numbers from week 15. Okay, let's move on to a guy we're thinking about sitting this week. Who's your sit at tight end?
Tyler Higley. I know last week he built a little better connection with Baker Mayfield, had a touchdown. But the weeks before that, he's put up very poor numbers. He's got a very tough matchup this week on Christmas against the Broncos. I could see him having a very poor week and disappointing a lot of owners out there.
Yep, I agree. Actually, he plays Cincinnati.
No, that's Hunter Henry.
Oh, my bad. You're right. Henry was right. He he showed me. All right, let's move on to my sit, and that is Cole Kmet. I'm not big on him this week. He's had a decent year, but not really what you've hoped. He has just 3 games with double-digit fantasy points. He has fewer than double-digit fantasy points 3 or 4 games. Really tough matchup this week against Buffalo. I think they're going to shut down that Bears passing game. They allow the 3rd fewest fantasy points to tight ends as well. So I don't like Cole Kmet much in week 16. All right, let's talk about the sleeper. Last one to talk about, Henry.
Yeah, I just mentioned him when we were going over matchups. Hunter Henry against Cincinnati. I know he hasn't been the best lately, but Cincinnati's not the best against the passing game. They could go to the safety blanket and Hunter Henry more after what happened last week with Jacoby Myers throwing the ball backwards and losing them the game. Bill Belichick might be upset about that, and they'd be like, let's go to Hunter Henry in this game. Probably might see a little bit more Stevenson also in this game, but Henry could have a pretty good week in Cincinnati.
All right, my sleeper is Jordan Akins with the Houston Texans. Scored his 3rd touchdown of the season last week. He has scores 2 of 4 games, becoming a bigger part of this offense. He has double-digit fantasy points 3 of 6 games. I know he can be hit or miss. I like his matchup this week against Tennessee. They're dead last against the pass this year. Titans allow 284.2 passing yards per game. Somebody has to catch passes in this offense. I think Akins could be a good red zone target for the Houston Texans. All right, Henry, those are our starts, sits, and sleepers for week 16. Appreciate you joining me. You got any teams left still playing in the fantasy playoffs?
Yeah, I got a couple left. One team that I really like, I got Saquon and Jacobs as my running back position.
Nice. Good deal. I got some teams left too. I'm excited about the week ahead. Games are kind of spread out this week, so please keep an eye on that. We have games Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So keep an eye on all these inactives and active as these games get started. Don't forget to set your lineups. And most importantly, have a great holiday season, right?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. This has been Jeff Paur with RealTime Fantasy Sports.
And Henry Power.
Have a great day, everyone.